Have you ever imagined being thrown out of your own daughter's house just because she saw you as an extra mouth to feed? And then picture this, months later, that same mother becomes the owner of her daughter's entire building, and triples the rent. This is the story of betrayal, strength, and a mother who refused to break. Before I begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, and share your thoughts in the comments below. My name is Diana, and what I'm about to tell you is my story. A story that still feels unreal when I think back to it. I never thought my own daughter would be the one to cut me the deepest. I'm 64 years old now. My husband passed away years ago, and since then, my whole life has been about one thing: raising my daughter, Sonia, and giving her the kind of life I never had. I worked day and night, doing sewing jobs, cleaning, even taking on odd tasks, anything that would bring in money. Every extra penny went into Sonia's education, her clothes, her books, her future. When she graduated, I felt proud. When she got married to the man of her choice, I thought, finally, my daughter will live the happy life I always dreamed of for her. She and her husband welcomed me into their home, and I moved into a small spare room. I didn't care that it was small. What mattered to me was being close to Sonia and my grandchildren. At first, I thought everything was fine. I helped around the house, cooked meals, watched the children when Sonia was busy with work. I thought I was making their lives easier. But little by little, I noticed her tone changing. She began snapping at me over the smallest things. If I used a little too much sugar, if I played with the children too long, if I stayed up late, everything seemed to bother her. I brushed it off. I told myself she was stressed from work, or tired. I never wanted to argue with her. She was my daughter, the one I raised with my own hands. But one evening, everything changed. We were all sitting at the dinner table, Sonia, her husband, the two children, and me. The food was warm, the atmosphere seemed calm. And then, Sonia looked at me and said words I will never forget for the rest of my life. "Mom, you've become an extra mouth to feed. We can't keep supporting you. You'll have to take care of yourself. You can't stay here anymore." It felt like the ground slipped from under me. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My heart stopped. My daughter, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was now telling me I was nothing more than a burden. The food on my plate turned cold as tears filled my eyes. I couldn't even find the strength to argue. I just lowered my head and stayed quiet. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I went into my little room and quietly packed 2 small bags. I didn't own much anymore. A few clothes, an old diary, and a photograph of my late husband, those were the only things that mattered to me. When I was leaving, Sonia stood in the hallway, silent. Her husband didn't say a word either. Only my 8-year-old granddaughter ran up to me, wrapped her tiny arms around me, and whispered, "Grandma, why are you leaving? I'll miss you." I hugged her tightly, my heart shattering into pieces, and whispered back, "I love you more than you'll ever know." And then I walked out of that house. That night, I stayed with an old friend who was kind enough to give me a place to sleep. But inside, I felt completely broken. I kept hearing Sonia's words in my head, "Extra mouth, extra mouth." It echoed in me like a cruel song. For 2 days, I cried endlessly. I felt abandoned, worthless, like I no longer had a place in this world. But on the 3rd morning, something inside me shifted. I sat with my diary in my lap and my husband's photograph in my hand. His voice echoed in my memory. He had always told me, "Diana, you are stronger than you think. Don't let life defeat you." And in that moment, I realized he was right. I couldn't let myself waste away in sorrow. I had to find a way to stand again. I had to show Sonia that the woman she dismissed as a burden was far more capable than she ever imagined. That same day, my friend's husband, who worked in real estate, sat with me and explained how property investments worked. He talked about buying small spaces, renting them out, building steady income. At first, it sounded overwhelming. I had never imagined myself dealing with such things. But as he spoke, I felt a spark light up inside me. I still had some savings left, money I had put aside over the years for emergencies. And I decided right there, this would be my new beginning. If I had to take on small jobs again to make it work, I would. But I would invest, grow, and build something of my own. That night, I didn't cry. For the first time since Sonia's betrayal, I felt something else. Not sadness, not despair, but determination. I was no longer just the mother who was thrown out of her daughter's home. I was Diana, a woman about to rise again. That morning when I finally decided to stand up for myself, I felt lighter, even though my life had never been heavier. For 2 days I had cried until my chest hurt, but now I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. My friend's husband, Mr. Ahmed, saw the change in me. Over breakfast he asked gently, "Diana, are you really serious about trying this path? Real estate isn't easy. It requires patience, strategy, and courage." I looked him straight in the eyes and said, if I could raise a daughter on my own, working endless jobs just to keep her fed and educated, then I can learn this too. He smiled, almost impressed, and started showing me the basics. He talked about rental yields, about how location mattered more than size, about how sometimes you didn't need to buy the fanciest property, you just had to be smart about where you put your money. I listened carefully, writing notes in my diary, as if my life depended on it. And in a way, it did. For the next 2 weeks, I followed him around like an eager student. Whenever he visited a property, I asked questions. Whenever he negotiated, I watched how he spoke. At night, I sat with my notebook, going over every word until it made sense. And slowly, I began to believe I could actually do it. One afternoon, he showed me a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The building wasn't new, but it was in a growing neighborhood. Families were moving there because it was cheaper than the city center. The owner wanted to sell quickly, and the price was reasonable. "Diana," he said, "this could be a good start for you. It's not huge, but it's manageable. And with the right tenants, it will bring you steady income." My heart pounded as I stood inside that empty apartment. The walls were chipped, the kitchen was small, but all I saw was potential. I could already imagine someone calling it home. I had just enough savings to cover the down payment. My hands trembled when I signed the paperwork, but once it was done, I felt a surge of pride. For the first time in my life, I owned something that was entirely mine. It wasn't just an apartment. It was my first step toward independence. Within a month, I had tenants, a young couple with a newborn baby. They paid rent on time, and though it wasn't a fortune, it was enough to keep me afloat. More importantly, it proved something: I wasn't helpless. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling with tears of a different kind streaming down my face. Tears of relief. Tears of hope. But deep inside, another feeling was growing. I wanted more. Not just because I wanted security. Not just because I wanted to feel strong. But because of Sonia. Her words haunted me still: "You're an extra mouth." I wanted to show her that the extra mouth she had discarded could become something she never expected. I didn't want revenge for the sake of cruelty. I wanted her to realize what she had thrown away. Over the next year, I worked tirelessly. I picked up part-time jobs, teaching sewing, babysitting for neighbors, even cleaning offices in the evenings. Every penny I saved went into my growing dream. By the end of that year, I had managed to buy a second property, another small apartment in the same neighborhood. Then a third. Each time, my confidence grew. Each time, I felt a little stronger. Mr. Ahmed once told me, "Diana, You're not just surviving anymore. You're building a legacy. And he was right. But fate has a strange way of twisting stories. Because one day, while browsing listings, I came across a property that made my heart stop. It was Sonia's building. The very same building where she lived with her husband and children. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the listing was real. The building's current owner was struggling financially and had put it up for sale. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the screen. Was this a sign? Was this destiny handing me the exact chance I didn't even know I was waiting for? I spent days thinking about it. It wasn't going to be easy. The building was bigger, more expensive, more complicated than anything I had bought before. It would require nearly all of my savings plus a small loan. Part of me was afraid. But another part, the part that had been ignored, disrespected, called a burden, knew I had to do it. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about dignity. I went ahead with the purchase. The paperwork took weeks, but eventually, it was official. I was the new owner of the building my daughter lived in. The day I held those keys in my hand, I felt a storm of emotions, satisfaction, power, and yes, a little sadness. Because deep down, I wished things had never come to this. I wished Sonia had seen my value long before. But she hadn't. And now, the tables had turned. The first month after the transfer, I didn't change anything. Sonia and the other tenants continued paying the same rent they always had. I didn't want to shock them right away. But the second month, I raised the rent. Not by a little. By triple. It wasn't illegal. The contracts were due for renewal, and I had every right as the landlord. Most of the tenants accepted because the location was good and moving would be a hassle. And Sonia? She was furious. She came storming to the landlord's office, demanding to speak to the new owner. She had no idea it was me. That day, as she walked into the office and saw me sitting behind the desk, the look on her face was something I'll never forget. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and for the first time in years, she was speechless. I looked at her calmly and said, "Hello, Sonia. I hear you're unhappy with your rent." Sonia stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words but couldn't. For a moment, the silence between us felt heavy, almost unbearable. This was the daughter I had once carried in my arms, the little girl I had sung lullabies to, now standing before me in shock because the mother she had discarded was suddenly in control of her roof. Finally, she found her voice. What are you doing here? Why are you sitting there?" I leaned back in the chair, keeping my tone calm. "Because, Sonia, this is my office. I'm the owner of this building now." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the disbelief on her face. She shook her head violently. "No. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You could barely take care of yourself." Those words stung, but I refused to let them show. Instead, I folded my hands and smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what someone can do when they're pushed to their limits. I told you once that I was stronger than you thought. You didn't believe me." She blinked at me, struggling to process everything. "You mean, you really own this building?" "Yes," I said simply. "Every brick, every hallway, every apartment, including yours." Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, she looked like the child I used to scold when she was caught lying. But this wasn't about mischief anymore. This was about life. "You can't do this," she snapped finally, slamming her hand on the desk. "Tripling the rent? That's outrageous. We can't afford that." I met her anger with a steady gaze. "When you asked me to leave your home, you didn't think about whether I could afford to live somewhere else. You didn't think about how I would survive. You only thought about yourself, Sonia. And now, I'm only thinking about myself too. Her face flushed red. That's different. We have children, responsibilities. I cut her off softly. And what was I? An extra mouth, remember? That's what you called me. An extra mouth. The silence that followed was thick. She looked away, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the power in the room. Not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because for so long I had been the one begging, apologizing, shrinking myself down to nothing. And now I was standing tall. I don't want to fight with you, I said after a long pause. But I won't apologize for taking control of my life. The rent is fair for the market. Everyone else in this neighborhood pays the same now. I'm not giving you special treatment just because you're my daughter. She flinched at the word daughter, like it hurt her to hear it. Maybe it did. Maybe, deep down, she knew she had betrayed that bond long before. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she whispered. To your own family. I wanted to laugh at the irony, but I held it in. Instead, I said gently, family isn't about blood, Sonia. It's about how we treat each other. When you threw me out, did you think of me as family? Or just as a burden? Her lips trembled, but no words came out. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Her eyes were glassy with unshed tears, but her pride kept her from letting them fall. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered the nights I had spent crying myself to sleep, alone and abandoned, because of her words. And that pity hardened into resolve. She finally turned on her heel and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. When the sound of her footsteps faded, I sat back in my chair and let out a deep breath. My hands were shaking slightly, though I hadn't let her see it. That confrontation had taken everything out of me. But I also knew it wasn't over. The next few weeks were tense. Sonia tried everything, pleading, threatening, even asking her husband to intervene. But I didn't budge. The rent increase was official, and she had to either pay it or move out. Some nights, I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far. Was I really just protecting myself, or was I letting bitterness guide me? The line between strength and revenge is thin, and I kept questioning which side I was standing on. But every time I replayed her words, extra mouth, I reminded myself why I was here. I hadn't asked for this battle. She had started it when she cast me aside. One evening, about a month later, I was leaving the building when I heard laughter coming from one of the hallways. I turned and saw Sonia's children. My grandchildren, playing on the floor with their toys. They looked up and saw me, their faces lighting up. Grandma, they squealed, running toward me with open arms. For a moment, all the walls I had built around my heart began to crack. I bent down, hugging them tightly, inhaling the sweet, innocent scent of childhood. They had no idea about the tension between their mother and me. To them, I was just grandma, someone who loved them unconditionally. Sonia appeared in the hallway a second later, her expression a mixture of discomfort and longing. She watched as her children clung to me, giggling, showing me their toys. I met her eyes over their heads, and for the first time, I saw something different in her gaze. Not anger. Not pride. But guilt. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her face kept haunting me. Maybe this wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. Maybe it was about something deeper, something broken between us that needed healing. But was it too late for that? Could we ever find our way back to being mother and daughter again? The question stayed with me for days, unanswered. And then, one evening, Sonia knocked on my office door again. This time, she didn't storm in. She didn't shout. She just walked in slowly, her shoulders slumped, her eyes tired. "Mom," she said softly. It had been so long since she called me that. The word hit me harder than I expected. She sat down in front of me, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I said that day. I was stressed, overwhelmed, and I took it out on you. But I never stopped loving you. Her voice cracked, and she wiped at her eyes quickly. I sat there in silence, my heart aching. This was the moment I had dreamed of, the apology I thought would never come. But could I trust it? Could I let go of the pain so easily? I leaned forward slowly and whispered, "Then prove it, Sonia. Prove that I still matter to you." She looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. How? And that was the question I didn't have an answer to. Not yet. The following morning, I woke with a sense of both anticipation and dread. Sonia's words from last night replayed over and over in my mind. I'm sorry. I never stopped loving you. Could I really believe her? Could I let myself soften after everything that had happened? I got out of bed and walked through the hallway of the building I now owned. Every door, every apartment reminded me of my journey, the struggle, the tears, the relentless determination that had brought me here. But most of all, they reminded me of Sonia. The daughter who had once cast me aside was still my daughter, and my heart refused to completely shut her out. As I stepped into my office, the papers on my desk felt heavier than usual. The rent adjustments, tenant agreements, and ongoing management tasks demanded my attention, yet I found myself staring out the window, thinking about the complicated web of feelings Sonia had woven into my life. I was still unsure of her intentions, but her apology had sparked something, a tiny flame of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. I decided to let time be the judge. I wouldn't act impulsively. I needed to see if her actions matched her words. The next few days were tense. Sonia moved through the building like a shadow, carefully avoiding direct confrontation. She still came to the office occasionally to pay the rent, but the air between us was charged, a mix of hesitation, guilt, and unspoken emotions. One afternoon, I found myself in the lobby, checking on some maintenance work. I saw Sonia crouched down, helping her children with their school projects. There was something quietly human about that scene, the way she explained things, patiently correcting mistakes, the soft smiles she exchanged with her children. It reminded me of the little girl she used to be, the one I had cradled in my arms so many years ago. I felt a pang of nostalgia, but also a pang of sadness. How had it come to this? How had a relationship that should have been based on love turned into tension and resentment? That evening, I sat down with my diary, writing everything I felt. Writing helped me process the storm inside my heart. I recorded my fear, my hope, my anger, and my determination. It reminded me of why I had fought so hard, not for revenge alone, but for my own sense of dignity and self-worth. Later that night, Sonia came to my office. This time, her demeanor was different. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't angry. She simply sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes downcast. "Mom," she began, her voice almost a whisper, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About the way I treated you. I realize now that I was wrong, terribly wrong." I studied her carefully. Her words were sincere, but sincerity doesn't always translate into trust. "Sonia," I said softly, "apologies are only meaningful if they come with change. If your actions show that you understand what you did." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. I want to make things right. I want you in our lives again, in a real way, not just as a tenant, not just as a mother I can't see, but as someone who belongs here." Her words caught me off guard. Belongs here. That was all I had ever wanted, to belong in my daughter's life. But the road to rebuilding that bond wasn't going to be simple. Over the next few weeks, we navigated a delicate balance. I was the landlord, the authority figure in her daily life, and yet I was her mother, the person who had once carried her through every hardship. It was strange, almost surreal, to occupy both roles at once. I watched her carefully, noting the subtle changes. She started consulting me before making decisions about the children's schedule, asking for advice on household matters, and even offering to help with building-related chores occasionally. Small gestures, but significant. It was clear she was trying. One evening, after the children were asleep, she knocked on my door. I invited her in, curious to see what she had to say. "Mom," she said, sitting across from me, "I want to ask something. Not as a daughter, not as a tenant, but as someone who wants to rebuild trust. Will you come to dinner with us? Just once. No arguments, no tension. Just you, me, and the kids." Her request tugged at my heart. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to embrace the chance for reconciliation. But another part, guarded, scarred from the past, warned me to proceed cautiously. Finally, I nodded. "I'll come," I said. "But I expect honesty. No pretending. No shortcuts. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be real." She smiled faintly, relief washing over her face. "I understand, Mom. Thank you." The dinner was awkward at first. We all sat around the table, the children chatting happily, unaware of the tension lingering in the air. Sonia tried to break the ice with light conversation, sharing small stories from her day. I listened, occasionally offering advice or sharing a memory from when she was young. Slowly, the ice began to thaw. By the end of the evening, there was laughter, real, heartfelt laughter. For the first time in months, I felt the warmth of family in a way I hadn't experienced since being thrown out. The connection was fragile, delicate, but it existed. As I left that night, Sonia walked me to the door. She looked nervous, yet hopeful. "Mom, I know it will take time. But I want you to be a part of our lives, fully. Can we try?" I paused, taking in her words, the sincerity in her eyes. I nodded slowly. "We'll try. But remember, rebuilding trust isn't instant. It's earned, step by step." She smiled again, this time without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." After she closed the door, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the hallway. The journey wasn't over. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time, I felt hope, a genuine, unwavering hope. I returned to my office, sat behind the desk, and reflected on how far I had come. From the day Sonia called me an extra mouth, to this evening, I had fought for my dignity, my independence, and my sense of self-worth. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation. Yet here I was, standing strong, owning my life and even the building that once symbolized my rejection. And though the road to complete reconciliation with Sonia would take time, I realized something crucial. I was no longer the person who allowed herself to be diminished by others. I had found strength within myself, a resilience that nothing could take away. That night, as I closed my diary and turned off the lights, I felt a sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I knew I was finally in control of my life. And for the first time in a long while, I looked forward to the days ahead, ready to face whatever came next with courage, dignity, and the quiet power of someone who refused to be broken. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Every interaction with Sonia was cautious, delicate. I could see the weight of guilt pressing down on her, but pride still lingered, making it difficult for her to fully accept the shift in our dynamic. I had become the authority in her world, the one she once rejected, and that power carried with it a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Sonia tried to navigate this new reality with careful steps. She started consulting me about repairs, rent issues, and even minor tenant disputes. For her, it was humbling; for me, it was empowering. but I refused to let that empowerment cloud my judgment. I had learned long ago that patience was the greatest tool a person could have. One afternoon, I received a call from one of the tenants. A pipe had burst in the building, flooding part of the ground floor. I grabbed my coat and rushed over, accompanied by Sonia, who had insisted on coming along. As we walked through the hallways filled with dripping water and concerned tenants, I noticed her demeanor had shifted. She wasn't defensive or combative anymore. She was cooperative, focused, even apologetic when she realized how much work managing a property actually required. Standing in the flooded corridor, I realized how far we had both come. This building, once just a place of tension and resentment, was becoming a shared responsibility. And in that shared responsibility, I saw the first real signs of reconciliation. Later that evening, after the tenants had been settled, Sonia and I sat down in my office. I looked at her and said, "Managing this building is not easy. But it's not impossible either. It requires strategy, patience, and honesty. Do you understand what I mean?" She nodded, her eyes sincere. "I do, Mom. I never realized all the responsibilities, all the decisions. I just assumed it would be easy." I smiled faintly. "That's the point, Sonia. Life isn't easy. But we rise when we refuse to let circumstances define us. That's what I've done. That's what I'm still doing." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. I want to learn from you. I want to understand how to take responsibility properly, how to manage everything." It wasn't just about property or money anymore. It was about respect, respect for the effort, the sacrifices, and the wisdom that I had accumulated over the years. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally seeing me as more than a burden. Over the next few months, our interactions continued to evolve. I began mentoring her in small ways, explaining tenant rights, basic accounting, and negotiation tactics. It was strange, and at times awkward, but slowly, a sense of mutual understanding began to form. And yet, despite the progress, tension lingered beneath the surface. Sonia had been hurt by life in ways I couldn't fully undo, and I had my own memories of rejection that made it difficult to fully let go of the past. One evening, while reviewing tenant applications, Sonia hesitated at the door of my office. She looked at me with nervous eyes. "Mom, I have to ask. Will you ever forgive me completely? Can we ever go back to the way things were?" I paused, letting her words sink in. Forgiveness isn't instant, it's earned through consistent effort, through honesty and change. "Sonia," I said carefully, "I can forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We can rebuild what we've lost, yes, but it will take time, patience, and genuine understanding. Do you think you can commit to that?" She nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I will. I promise." It was in that moment I realized that power doesn't always come from holding authority over someone, it comes from the ability to guide, to teach, and to shape outcomes through wisdom rather than force. And in guiding Sonia, I felt a new kind of satisfaction. But fate wasn't done testing me yet. A few days later, an unexpected event shook the building. A tenant dispute escalated, and Sonia's husband got involved, demanding answers about rent increases and maintenance schedules. His tone was harsh, protective, and almost accusatory. I stayed calm, listening patiently, letting him vent. Finally, I addressed him directly. "I understand your concerns. The rent increase was necessary, fair, and within legal limits. I've ensured the building is safe, maintained, and livable. This isn't personal, it's business. But I'm open to dialogue if you have constructive suggestions." He was taken aback. I could see the surprise in his eyes, he hadn't expected me to speak with such authority. Sonia watched quietly, her expression a mix of awe and uncertainty. After he left, she turned to me and said softly, "Mom, I didn't realize how capable you are. How much you've endured to get here." I shook my head, trying to remain humble. "It's not about capability, Sonia. It's about necessity. I was forced to find strength because you turned me away. But now, I'm using that strength to create stability, not to hurt anyone." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, I felt a genuine shift. She wasn't just seeing me as a landlord anymore. She was seeing me as a person, a mother, a survivor, someone who had weathered the storm and come out stronger. Over the following weeks, Sonia began to take more initiative. She handled small maintenance requests, coordinated with tenants, and even consulted me on rental adjustments before implementing them. Each action, each step, reinforced the growing trust between us. And then came the moment I had been waiting for, the day Sonia came into my office, her posture steady, her eyes clear. "Mom," she said, "I want to thank you. Not just for giving me a home, or for helping me understand responsibility, but for showing me what true strength looks like. I was wrong about so many things, about you, about us. Can we start over?" I looked at her, the daughter who had once called me a burden, and nodded. "Yes, Sonia. We can start over. But remember, rebuilding trust isn't easy. It's earned every day, in every choice we make." Her lips curved into a small, tentative smile. "I'll earn it, Mom. I promise." That night, as I closed my office door, I felt a quiet triumph, not one born from revenge or anger, but from resilience, dignity, and the knowledge that I had reclaimed my place in my daughter's life. The building, once a symbol of rejection, had become a bridge, a way for Sonia and me to reconnect, to rediscover respect, and to rebuild a bond that neither of us wanted to lose. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. Real hope. Not just for myself, but for the family I had never stopped loving, even when they had turned away from me. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of the building began to settle. Tenants were adjusted to the new rent. Sonia had grown into her role managing her household and contributing to the building's upkeep, and I had found a renewed sense of purpose that extended beyond any single apartment or rental check. I walked through the corridors one afternoon, greeting tenants, checking repairs, making sure everything ran smoothly. It was a routine I had grown to enjoy, not out of necessity, but out of pride. Every door I opened, every tenant who thanked me for a prompt repair, reminded me of the life I had fought to rebuild. And then, of course, there was Sonia. The tension that once dominated our relationship had softened. She no longer avoided my office or crossed the hallway quickly to escape me. Instead, she greeted me with a smile, asked questions about the building, and even invited me to share a cup of tea in the afternoons. We weren't perfect, and there were still moments of discomfort, but the walls of resentment had started to crumble. One evening, as the children played outside, Sonia joined me in my office with a stack of papers. "Mom," she said, "I've been reviewing the building's finances, and I think we can invest in a small renovation project. Maybe repaint the hallways, fix the lobby, and upgrade the security." I looked at her, genuinely impressed. "You've been paying attention," I said, smiling. She shrugged lightly, her eyes glimmering. "I had a good teacher." I laughed softly, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Teaching her, guiding her, and seeing her grow into responsibility and understanding had become more meaningful than any rent increase or property deal. I realized that empowerment wasn't just about being in control, it was about shaping people, nurturing growth, and inspiring change. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Sonia knocked on my office door again. She entered quietly, a little hesitant, carrying a small box. "I wanted to give you this," she said, handing it over. Inside was a handmade photo album. Each page held pictures of our family, old photographs of me holding her as a baby, snapshots of her first day at school, birthdays, holidays, candid moments of laughter and love. On the last page was a simple note: "Mom, I understand now. I love you. Thank you for never giving up on me." Tears welled in my eyes. I held the album close, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and deep, profound love. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. I looked at Sonia and whispered, This means more to me than you'll ever know. It's not about the past anymore. It's about what we do from here." She nodded, her eyes misty. "I want to do better. I want us to be a real family again." And for the first time, I truly believed it was possible. The building itself, once a source of tension and a symbol of rejection, had become a catalyst for growth. It reminded me of the journey I had endured, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the relentless struggle to reclaim my dignity. But it also reminded me of resilience, empowerment, and the ability to transform pain into progress. Over the next few months, I guided Sonia through every aspect of property management. Together, we resolved tenant disputes, planned renovations, and even worked on improving the neighborhood's security and amenities. The process wasn't easy, but it brought us closer than we had been in years. One morning, as I walked through the lobby, a young tenant approached me. "Miss Diana," she said, smiling, "thank you for listening when we had problems. You've made this building feel like a real community." I smiled back, realizing that the journey had gone beyond personal satisfaction. The impact of my actions was spreading, creating a positive environment for others. And for Sonia, it had created respect and understanding that she had once denied me. That evening, Sonia and I sat together in my office, sipping tea. She turned to me, her voice soft but steady. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I know it took me far too long to understand. But I promise, from now on, I'll make sure our family is stronger, closer, and united. I want to learn from you, not just about managing this building, but about life." I placed a hand on hers, feeling a surge of emotion I couldn't put into words. "Sonia, I never stopped loving you. And I'm proud of the woman you are becoming. We'll keep moving forward, together." For the first time in years, I felt the tension lift from my shoulders. The pain of being called an extra mouth was no longer my anchor, it was a reminder of how far I had come. Weeks turned into months, and the building flourished. Tenants were happier, maintenance was smoother, and Sonia and I had developed a rhythm. We weren't just mother and daughter now, we were partners in life, learning from each other, teaching each other, and building a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. I realized then that the greatest revenge isn't to hurt someone who wronged you. The greatest revenge is to rise, to rebuild, to reclaim your life with dignity, and to inspire those around you. I had achieved that, not through anger, but through perseverance, wisdom, and love. And Sonia? She had grown too. She understood the value of humility, patience, and gratitude. She recognized that respect and love are earned through actions, not just words. On a quiet evening, I sat by the window of my office, looking out at the building I now managed, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Life had tested me in unimaginable ways, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I had turned betrayal into growth, rejection into opportunity, and pain into empowerment. And as I watched Sonia playing with her children in the courtyard, laughing freely, I knew that the bonds of family, once fractured, had been rebuilt stronger than ever. This journey had taught me that life doesn't always go the way we hope. Sometimes, it's painful. Sometimes, those we love the most hurt us. But if we stand firm, trust our strength, and act with purpose, we can create a life that is not only meaningful for ourselves but also inspires others. I closed my eyes, letting a sense of peace wash over me. I had fought for my dignity, reclaimed my place, and healed the relationship I thought was lost forever. And in that healing, I discovered the true power of resilience, love, and the unwavering spirit of a mother who refused to be discarded. From being an extra mouth to becoming the foundation of our family's future, I had proven, most of all to myself, that no one has the right to define your worth. That power always comes from within. And with that knowledge, I smiled, ready for whatever life had next, knowing that I was strong, capable, and finally at peace.